Poker's legendary champions, next generation stars, and tireless ambassadors of the game, sharing their wisdom and guiding your journey to high achievement on the green felt. This is Tactical Tuesday on Chasing Poker Greatness with your hosts, Brad Wilson and John Chai.
Welcome, my friend, to another episode of the Chasing Poker Greatness podcast. As always, this is your host, the founder of ChasingPokerGreatness.com, Coach Brad Wilson. And today is Tuesday, which means it's a tactical day. Mr. Jonathan Chai, how you doing, sir?
Doing good. Got some tactical 4-bet pots queued up for today's episode. That's going to be the theme. We got 4-bet pots, a mix of me being the 4-better and the caller pre-flop. So yeah, hopefully we'll see some cool hands today.
All right. I guess that's up to your judgment. You know, I'll let the audience decide whether or not they're cool or not. But 4-bet pots always fun, always high impact to your win rate, despite it being a low frequency event. Pots that you put 4 bets in the middle with pre-flop tend to be bigger than ones that you put 2 or 3 bets. So despite it being a lower frequency event, it does have a tangible impact on your win rate. So it is quite important to play these spots well and not just splatter money all across everywhere. So we're going to do 2 hands before the break, 2 hands after the break. And hand number 1, John, I guess I'll let you break down the action in this one.
Yeah, so we have a reg in the cutoff who opens to $25 at 510. We're playing 6 max. Everyone folds around to me. In the big blind, I have ace jack of clubs. Going to be pure 3-betting this versus a cutoff open, so I make it $110. And as is the theme of the episode, we get 4-bet to 242. Ace jack suited, just going to be peeling this 4-bet all day long. I don't think we have, I think we're going to be dominated quite frequently, and we're not doing particularly great versus the 4-betters range, but we're getting such a good price that that's actually okay.
Yeah, so getting 2.7 to 1 pre-flop, right? So you need 27% equity to continue. It's hard. It's hard for a range to have more than 27% equity versus ace jack suited pre-flop. So yeah, just falls naturally into your continuing range. I think it makes sense. And so you call.
We're kind of uneasy, right? We're not
great. Yeah, we're not feeling great. We're like, okay, like we probably have more than 27% equity against this range, but we're not essentially you're about as excited as you can be when you recognize that you're happy winning more than 1/4
quarter of
the time, right? Like it's an uneasy happiness essentially. You get a good board though. Can't really complain about the flop.
This is one of those situations where it's either a great board or you're screwed. You're screwed. Like bye 100 big blinds.
Yeah, Jack 6 tray. So you flop top pair, top kicker. I would say that holistically, it's a great board, right? Like you might get stacked on it, but like if you could manufacture a board pre-flop, like you would be happy to hit this one every single time, right?
Yeah. Would you be happier with this board or the ace high board?
It's a good question. Probably the ace high board. I guess they have
kings and queens,
15 combos of overpairs. 16 combos, I guess, if they have jacks that they 4-bet with. So 15 combos of overpairs on the jack. They're not going to have more than 15 combos of ace king on an ace high board. So I think you're safer with the ace high board, and I would feel better within the ace high. Although it's kind of hard to get a ton of action on an ace high board from villain's range unless it's
what I really wanted was 2 clubs.
That would be the best, right? That would be. That would be the best case scenario where it's like, yeah, okay, like deuce 4.
I'll give you aces. You can have aces.
deuce 4 of clubs. We're good. We can just like get it in and there's just feel great about it, especially with there being 479 in the middle already. But so here you have the ace jack. Villain has 758 behind. There's 489 in the middle, so SPR is like 1.5. You check, and villain bets a quarter. everything is totally normal and you just check call. There's really no alternative action to take from anybody.
Yeah, we're kind of just resigned to our fate on this board, right? Barring maybe like a king or queen on the turn or river.
Yeah.
We're a little bit, we're, you know, I don't know if it's like sad to say, but like we're kind of just like handcuffed in this situation where we just can never fold top pair top kicker in a 4-bet pot, especially versus someone who seems like a good reg, right? Someone who has a good 4-bet size in position, someone whose c-bet size on the flop seems to trend towards good reg. So I assume that this player type is going to be the player type that does show up with at least some bluffs in this situation. One of the things that I like, one of the things that I think about, especially when I'm playing live poker, is does this guy even have an IP 4-bet range that's not aces and kings, right? And I think like sometimes when you're playing live poker, that's like very, very true, where people might not even 4-bet ace king in position pre-flop, right? Whereas online that's going to happen all day. So I think for like especially for like someone who plays a lot of live or exclusively live that might be watching this, it might seem like extremely, even peeling just the ace jack might seem like a punt. And in live poker, I could very well see it being a punt. But I think when you're playing decent stakes online 6-max versus someone that you think is going to be a good reg, you sort of just have to grit your teeth a little bit with top pair top kicker and be willing to call down.
Yeah, I mean the wheels of fate are in motion, right? Not only do you have top pair top kicker, you block aces, which is really nice. I think it's probably not ultra great blocking a hand like ace queen or ace 10 that they might 4-bet,
or ace king
that they might 4-bet IP. So I think realistically speaking, your ace is probably a negative card. If you probably don't have like a hand like jack 9 suited in your range, maybe not even jack 10 suited that you call the 4-bet with and 3-bet with pure. But I think jack 10 would effectively be a better hand to have or jack 9 would kind of be the nut jack if you were to have that in your range, because then you don't block ace 10, you don't block ace king, you don't block ace queen, and those are hands that you would really, really prefer villain to have in their range.
Right.
In when you're bluff catching. So yeah, essentially for the listener too, like top is great, but how often do you expect your top pair to dominate any portion of villain's value range? King jack, for instance, it's never going to happen. So the fact that you have top pair top kicker, it doesn't really matter. Top pair is kind of the only thing that matters in this exact situation.
Yeah, or having a pair at all, I guess.
Sure. Having a pair at all.
Right, because at that point, what's the difference between pocket jacks and pocket nines, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, 9, like having a 2-out draw is significantly worse than a 5-out draw. So, having an actual pair with a side card, I think is way, 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 way better than like a hand like 9s, for instance.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point.
All right. So with all that said, the wheels of fate are in motion and pretty much locked in to calling down with your jack, and villain is pretty much locked into maximizing value or playing this 4-bet pot, playing their bluffs, etc. Like basically fate it's fated. Whatever the result is essentially fated at this stage of the hand here on the turn. Villain bets a quarter, and again, it's fate. You just call. You can't fold. You have no choices here.
Do you start getting a sinking feeling when you see quarter pot on the turn, then realize what the SPR on the river is going to be, and start asking yourself like, wow, are they really going to bluff river for like 40% pot? And just set up for that, or am I just kind of just walking into like the most obvious?
Hard to know, right? Like you can't. We can't like pull villain outside of their seat and ask them, what their strategy is. But yeah, it feels not great. The good news is with the SPR being what it is here on the river, there's 1,100 in the pot. Villain has 450. You're getting a great price to call, so you don't need for them to have too many bluffs in order to call down profitably, which is kind of the push and pull of the
silver lining.
Yeah. So you see glass half empty. There is a glass half full aspect of it as well. You check, villain jams. I imagine that you just call.
I think the thing that's important here is that like when you call here, you should not expect to see worse value, right? Like you said, like you're only going to see hands that beat you and hands that you and total airballs. So I think king queen offsuit a little bit wide for me. IP four bet. Um, I don't. I was a little surprised to see this combo. I thought it'd be, you know, the different category of hand that four bet bluffs IP. But you know, just another example of like decent stakes online six max regs are just going to be getting after it.
Yeah.
Also really just shows the power of four betting in position, right? Like I'm sitting here with top kicker, one of the strongest hands I'm ever going to have when I peel the four bet, and I'm still like, oh, like here we go, I guess. And so, you know, when this sort of stuff happens to me, when I'm in the position that I was in the big blind with ace jack, one of the things that I start thinking about immediately is like, maybe I should be four betting in position a little bit more, and you know, trying to put this bad feeling on other people.
Maybe. However, you know, in this case for the podcast, Lester Villain had the king queen of different suits, which means essentially that they're over bluffing pretty significantly, which, yeah, you can make people feel worse, but you felt bad, but you ended the hand with villain stack in a spot where you're just never folding and they're over bluffing. So I would say that it worked out quite well for the preflop caller here. Not really the preflop four better, but yeah, these are the type of hands that, you know, you would expect to see some sort of ace 10 off, king queen off, occasionally, depending on what villain's, you know, preflop four bet strat is. So hand number 2, nice hand, by the way. I guess nice hand, even though it was faded and you're pretty much.
Yeah, these first 2 hands I think are going to be more on the gimme side, and then the 2 hands after the break, you know, for those loyal listeners who stick around, they'll get the good stuff.
He's figuring it out. Look at this setup and curiosity, and he's doing it. He's doing it, ladies and gentlemen. You're witnessing the growth of John Chai in setting things up on Tactical Tuesday. So hand number 2, everybody folds. John's in the small blind with 9 and 10 of clubs. He opens versus the big blind, 230. The big blind 3 bets, 290. There are 100 big blinds deep per huge, essentially, for Tactical Tuesday and online poker in general. You're generally about 100 big blinds deep with your opponent. Villain in this case 3 bets. John 4 bets to 210, and the big blind calls. So John has 9-10 of clubs. He's the pre-flop 4 better.
This is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, this is a pretty good flop. Jack 8-6 with the 6 of clubs. So open ender with a backdoor flush draw. So 3 flush and a 4 straight. Pretty good times for the out of position pre-flop 4 better. I imagine you're just going to start out with a quarter and probably just go from there.
Mm-hmm. Plan is to start out with a quarter, blast off. Hopefully make a straight and not have to blast off. That'd be nice. So we bet $83 into 420 on the flop with our open end or backdoor flush draw. And
it's not exactly a quarter. It's 20% actually.
20%. Yeah.
Anyway, if my math serves me well, this is not a quarter. A quarter would be like
quarter-ish.
Quarter-ish. Villain raises, which kind of is whatever.
What?
I mean, I think the response to it is fairly obvious, so I'm not really sweating what strategy they're deploying is. I think the response for you is just to rip, and it's just pretty cut and dry. But it is kind of strange for villain to be.
Remember a few Tactical Tuesdays ago where I clicked aces in a 4-bet pot and said like, "Hey, there's this meta in this pool where everyone just clicks the small c bet in 4-bet pots, particularly in these like wide range situations." This is what that felt like to me. It was just like, oh, someone's just like, here we go. Like this board, like I'm just like, I'm surprised to get clicked at all on this board. Like or just face a raise at all. Usually when I face a raise, it's on a board that's like a little bit more dynamic, and they have a few more draws, I think, in their range that they can rep that they're, you know, that they might be happy to stack off with. This board, I was a little bit surprised to get clicked on, and thought that was all the more reason that it's, you know, just someone very, very in tune with the meta of this spot in this pool, and just trying to take advantage of the small c bet.
Yeah, I mean, again, like trying to break down their strategy here. I think the value that you would see after villain raises would probably be like a slow played aces would make some sense here. I think that hand makes like probably the most sense for value. Maybe slow played kings if they had that, and that's most of it. Maybe
Like-
some
Jack X, like trying to let me not over realize with like 2 overs type stuff that I, have lots and lots of on this board, and I'm just, get to kind of realize for really cheap for just quarter pot or 20% pot.
The problem with like the Jack X though, in kind of a little bit related to your first hand, like the Jack X that like is raising against like overcards over realizing is like most of the time their kicker is an overcard. So the over realization aspect of it goes like really down in value. If they have ace jack, they're like, oh, I don't want to let villain to over realize their ace king. Well, like really they only have a king because an ace gives you top 2, and like you very, very much want them to hit an ace. So it's hard for me to kind of see the over realization aspect with like Jack X, maybe 8X, or like Jack 10, like top pair weak kicker without the queen, king, or ace. But
that's what I was imagining.
Yeah, I think that's probably pretty accurate. And so not many of those hands, many of those hands want to see a jam. And by the way, the hands in the middle block your draws, which is not really great for them calling the jam after you bet jam either. Because Jack 10 blocks 9-10, but that's not actually great when villain bet jams on the flop because now villain has less draws. So you jam as expected, and villain folds, which I gotta say, that's a good result.
Yeah. Really, really happy, especially when I see what his hand is. This was a weird one.
And I have 2 9s. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a hand that's hard to improve. Like maybe they're just trying to essentially over realize their share of the pot by raising the flop and folding out. Essentially they're going to fold out most of your worst hands and get called by hands that have like very, very little equity. So not sure.
Get called by hands that have very little equity? What hands do I call with that have?
Where they have very little equity.
Oh, where they have. Oh, I see. Yeah.
If you call their raise, they're essentially
right. Toast.
It's very bad news for them. So the only sort of explanation or justification would be that, they have an equity share in the pot and they want to realize their equity right now and basically in the hand, which feels a little bit dicey, especially considering that, they're giving you 5-1 on the flop here with their raise. So like you folding is going to be a pretty low frequency event, I would imagine. So essentially their goal of over realizing like probably doesn't even happen at the rate that they would like it to. So yeah, very nice. Well done. Not sure if I'll recap for the podcast listener before we hit the break and come back, but flop is Jack 8-6, John bet a quarter, villain raised to 226. So 2.5x-ish. John jammed and villain folded with 563 back. They had 2 9s on Jack 8-6 and John won with his 9-10 high. Actually, villain folding just saved themselves a stack because I just can't imagine them fading this open ender with a
club on the flop too, right? It's just
dead.
I could just make a 10, right? Like
right. So villain made a good fold essentially. So stick around after the break. Gonna have 2 more 4-bet pot spots coming right at you.
Are you a lone wolf searching for the ultimate pack? The CPG Wolf program is a close-knit brotherhood hell-bent on one thing only: chasing poker greatness. Powered by bleeding-edge wolf strats and led by Coach Brad and his lieutenants, CPG Wolves are systematically prepared for almost any spot they'll encounter on the green felt. If you want to plug into an elite team and have a step-by-step game plan to realize your full poker potential, you can apply at cpgwolves.com. Space is limited, and the pack is only as strong as its weakest member. So only the hungriest, grittiest, and most driven will be accepted into the program. Applications are open at cpgwolves.com.
All right. Welcome back from the break. in today's 4-bet pot episodes. We have had 0 incidences leading up to this point, but John prefaced, before the break that things are about to get dicier here in the back half. So, with that said, let's just dive into this diciness. You want to break down the action in the first?
Sure. So a big reason it gets dicier is because I'm the pre-flop 4-better in these 2 hands. I open ace-8 of hearts in the cutoff. Small blind, who appears to be a reg 3 bets to 100. This is going to be one of my IP 4-bet bluffs, so bump it up to 225. Starting the hand, about 110 big blinds effective. The small blind calls, so we go to a flop with 460 in the middle. Queen Jack 6, 1 heart, 2 clubs, very wet board. Small blind starts out with check. That's pretty much what we expect. I think on this board texture, we could consider not c-betting. I don't know what you think, or like how you approach a board like this, where it's feels like it connects very, very heavily with the pre-flop callers range, and maybe not so well with the 4-betters range.
I mean, maybe. Like, I think ace king, and then the ace 10, probably the primary candidates that villain sees that whiff this board. Both of those have a gut shot, and then other than the hands that have a gut shot to the nuts, you have a bunch of hands that queens don't know if you 4-bet jacks here IP. Maybe queen jack suited, and then king queen. I guess you don't 4-bet queen jack suited either. King queen off, maybe ace queen off. Well, from villain's perspective, like I think it's a reason. Like 4-betting ace queen off here is something that like you wouldn't like bat an eye at if you saw somebody do it in game, right? So you do have that that hand to be seen in your range potentially.
So you just kind of proceed normally here on this board, and
I think so. I do think I do wonder about the typical quarter sizing, and wonder about maybe betting half pot here on the flop, like sizing up on such a dynamic board where you do have your range is essentially more polar, or just by nature, right? You have like hands that connect with the board quite well, and then you have hands that are like gut shots. And generally, I think if your range is polar, then you typically are choosing a bigger size.
I think that's definitely reasonable logic. I briefly considered checking back. I did not consider betting bigger on this flop, and just ended up going with the standard approach and c-betting small. I don't love this though. I mean, for all the reasons that you said, I think this is. I expect to get check raised pretty heavily on this board. Just more. I expect to get check raised here at a higher frequency than an average board, I guess is the way to put it. And I think that starting out with quarter basically induces that a little bit more frequently. Maybe it doesn't induce it from like a different range. Maybe it's not like just total random hands start check raising here. But I think that there's some hands that might call or even fold versus half, and then might decide to check raise versus quarter, which is not great when we do have backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw overcard to get check raised by, let's say, a hand like 10-9 suited or something like that might not check raise versus half. So definitely see the argument for c-betting,
or like
c-betting
ace,
bigger
ace
here.
10 suited or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Diamonds. I think for what it's worth, that sort of discussion that we had before you bet, I don't know if ace 8 of hearts actually even would fall into my range that would bet big. Right, we didn't really talk about like where this hand fits into like a big betting strategy, and I could totally see ace 8 of hearts fitting into my check strategy instead of my big bet strategy. I was more speaking, I guess, to the way that I sort of holistically view the situation before, kind of seeing where my or your exact hand fit into that strategy as a whole. So I don't know that I would big bet ace 8 of hearts here, and it would most likely just fall into my check behind strat instead, which
and your big bet range is going to be like front door draws.
Yeah, like front door draws. The aforementioned like ace 10, potentially like the ace king type hand, and having a club I think would be doubly nice with the ace king, like ace of clubs king, or king of clubs ace type hand. So yeah, that would be, and then maybe more inclined to check back my ace kings that like don't have a club essentially, but something along those lines for my IP 4-bet strat.
But I stick with the standard plan here and get called. Turn is the 3 of hearts, so we turn a flush draw. The board is queen jack 6-3 double flush draw. There's 642 in the pot. I have 8-10 behind. So we face check.
By the way, we didn't mention this, and as it related, you mentioned like getting check raised more frequently when you bet small. But there's, I think, a flip side of the equation too, is like possible that you get check raised less frequently by their value when you bet small compared to if you bet half. Like,
and they just jam their queen next facing half.
Or like a set of jacks, maybe, right? Like maybe they just like rip a set of jacks facing half, but call versus quarter because they realize like, oh, they could just be like c-betting range, and I can jam if turn checks through, etc. So like that's sort of an alternative. It's another strategic reaction that we kind of glossed over there on the flop. Turn is the tray of hearts, so you turn your flush draw. You got 8-10 left. Villain, the pot is 642. Villain's got you covered by a country mile. This is an interesting. This is a very. I
kind of froze
decision.
up. Yeah, I kind of froze up in the spot. I thought that there were so many different options available here. I thought jam was the first thing that came to mind. Another option was just go quarter, and then the third option that I considered was just check back ace-8 high and try to realize my equity.
I don't like quarter. I can say that much. Quarter feels the diciest, because your hand essentially got promoted to being too good to bet fold. Like I wouldn't treat I treat my equity better than that. I don't want to just like put it out there so that I can't realize this gift of a turn card.
That was the second step in my thought process, was I don't want to bet fold this hand, so I probably shouldn't use quarter. So now my options were to check back or to jam ace-8. Jamming on like double flush draw board, do I get called like wider than the normal? Probably. I don't know, although I don't really know what that means. Like, does he just start calling with like a pair of jacks or something like that in the spot?
I don't know normally what it means either.
Might not call with. Yeah.
I think jamming is totally fine. Like, I think it's really hard for villain to. It's really tough for villain to call frequently enough, and really tough to exploit you. This is probably one of the few hands that you would just jam the turn with. So I think it's probably just fine. I think you could make the argument for jamming like kings. I think kings is like a totally reasonable hand to like jam with for value here on the turn, to go along with your flush draws and combo draws, because you don't have a ton of those, so you don't need a ton of value backing it up. But like kings or aces would be the primary value, I think, that you would just rip the turn with.
Yeah. And anyways, like I said, I got to that sort of point in my thought process, then froze up a little bit, decided that, or I don't know, was for some reason extra worried about getting called a lot on a double flush draw board. So I actually decided to check back ace-8 of hearts here.
That's reasonable.
And I kind of get bailed out on the river.
Yeah, the river's a king of diamonds. I mean, bailed out, I think is like a strong language, right? Because like, you when you check back, like it's within like the strategic framework of the situation that a king or a 10 is really good for you. Like a king or a 10 are like great developments for you being able to like jam facing a check on the river. So this just happens to be like a card that doesn't improve your hand, but improves your range substantially. That is quite bad for villain, which the natural consequence of that is they just check a lot and you get to jam basically. Yeah.
And I think part of that, I'm sure this was part of what you meant by they check a lot, is that they just don't bluff as frequently on this river, right? Like on a brick river, they might bluff jam. I would expect them to bluff jam at a higher frequency than they would on a king or a 10 river. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I meant by getting bailed out. So small blind does check.
Yeah, I mean, the king is just like good for you. Like just, range versus range, the king hits you, square and reduces your availability of low equity hands. And if a card reduces your availability of low equity hands by just the side effect of that is that your entire range has a lot more equity, which means that it's a good card for you and not a great card for villain. Which just leads the villain to checking, and they're almost certainly checking range. I think they should check range here if they have like 2-pair set, whatever. They just have to check range. And then when you jam, essentially you have to fade the river 2-pair or flop set or river straight type scenarios. And villain does fold. I think maybe like villain can also river like king 10 or something and find a call with like a top pair that improves. But top pair that improves and then also blocks ace 10, I think would be great properties of a bluff catching hand.
Yeah.
And what did they fold?
I think I definitely got bailed out on the river. I assume ace 9 of spades bluffs most rivers, and this is just one of the few that he realizes like I just kind of have to throw my hands up and surrender here with my ace 9, even though it's going to lose.
Yeah. Maybe I beat ace 5.
Maybe ace 5 checks back on this gift of a river. No way.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say you did get bailed out. On the flip side too, like you can river a heart and capture a lot of value from villain's ace 9. So I think it's somewhat treacherous for villain to continue here, like on the flop with ace 9. I think it's probably should just be a fold. That hand is like just kind of
arguably pre-flop.
I didn't even think about pre-flop, but pre-flop and then on the flop, I think are both probably just kind of forcing it and defending with too much of your range. So with that hand down, oh no, don't look, close your eyes, avert your eyes. Okay, so accidentally switched to the last hand on YouTube with the hole cards up for the podcast listener who's probably like really confused right now. Don't avert your eyes. You're driving your car. You need to keep your eyes on the road. So hand number 4, the grand finale. You have queens in small blind. MP opens. You're playing 5-handed, so MP low jack, whichever. But MP opens here, playing 5-handed. Button 3 bets to 90. You cold 4 to 240. MP folds the original opener, and the button calls. Everything about this is just pretty normal. The only thing that's a little bit abnormal is a 3-bet sizing on the button.
Yeah,
like a click or two up from normal. You would expect to see 75 to 80. Especially this 22.5 open. So that's a thing that's like a little bit out of place.
This is my second hand at the table. And that was one of the first things that I noticed was the 9BB 3-bet facing the 2.25 open, which is the 9BB 3-bet would be big facing the 2.5x open, but is just like almost like flat out inappropriate facing the 2.25, right? So like I already have a feeling that the button is likely just a bad reg or maybe a straight up fish that is picking a strange 3-bet size. I guess that's exactly pot. No, maybe it's a little bit smaller. Anyways, it's very, very big, probably too big. Definitely bigger than what most of the good regs in the pool are going. So I think there definitely is a pre-flop data point to pick up here with the 3-bet sizing.
Yeah, I agree. Again, can't really ask for a better flop. Tray 5-7. With the tray 5 of spades, you have the black queens. And in this situation, you opt to check, which, that's contrary to the other spots where you're c-betting quarter. So I guess let's get into why you opted to check here.
So I'm reading a lot into the pre-flop stuff and just really hoping that this guy probably peels the cold 4 too wide the same way a lot of fish do, where they just seem to not fold to 4-bets once they 3-bet. So their 3-bet frequency is a little lower than average, but then their call 4-bet frequency is like way higher than average. I think like one of the mistakes that a lot of bad regs and fish make too is that once the pre-flop 4-better or even 3-better sometimes just 3-bets and 4-bets pre-flop and then checks a low board, they this happens all the time. Like, oh, I put you on ace king, and they do really ridiculous things like start betting, 5-6 suited here for protection because they don't want ace king to make a pair on the turn or the river. So like, I think there's value to capture that way. I think there's also like a lot of value to capture from the smaller over pairs that might start folding at a later street, but might just stack off here facing check jam, right? Like a pocket eights or pocket nines or pocket tens, just, maybe does something ridiculous like c-bets half pot and then has to call a jam because they bet way too big. And then the most obvious thing that can happen here is that they just take a completely hopeless hand and start bluffing a hand that could never call a c-bet on the flop.
Yeah, I think it's really good. I think it just logically makes all the sense in the world. And it's just kind of funny how we sort of oscillate from, oh, this is like a cold 4-bet spot, just kind of a standard spot where you're typically betting a quarter, and the data point that you're prioritizing here and checking is that tiny data point of like just a click more with their 3-bet sizing than is typical or standard. So you go from like thinking about the spot like at an incredibly high level to sort of tapering back and being like, well, strategically speaking, if this villain is a weaker reg, possibly a fish, then checking I think is going to outperform betting a quarter. So your whole strategy dependent upon that one little shift in sizing pre-flop, which is pretty interesting, pretty cool. So you check, villain checks behind.
Darn it.
Yeah, not the end of the world. I think they will check behind some. You can clearly still get value from like their pairs, and they can spike a jack or a 10 on the turn with like ace jack, ace 10, those type of hands. So you check.
I try again.
You check. The turn is the 7 of clubs, so puts up a 3 flush.
7 of spades.
7 of spades, sorry. Puts up a 3 flush, pairs the top card. You do have the queen of spades, so you do have a flush draw, and just try again, as they say. So
plan is just to jam the river, and like you said, hope they make top pair on the river sometimes, and just call with a jack or a 10.
Sure. And for those villains who proceeded cautiously on the flop with a hand like 8s or 9s, facing double check, giving them another opportunity to place a bet here on the turn. Once they're, reasonably confident, they're like, okay. Like maybe they can check like their really strong hands like on the flop, but the flop and the turn. All right, now I'm beginning to get suspicious that I'm just like going to check behind, letting them like fully realize and try to hit an ace, king, queen, etc. So,
or they might just value bet versus like an ace 5 suited, right? And be like, oh shit, like 8s, maybe I can just.
Yeah, or 9s or 10s, right? Like I think 10s can probably start betting for value. I don't really know about the size villain chose. So you check villain bet half pot, which lines up with the pre-flop information quite well. I don't think this sizing should be a thing. Typically going to be much smaller than half here on the turn. So like a quarter or third would be what is expected. This is against expectation and just creates you just jam. I think you just essentially have to jam. I don't see an alternative. I don't think.
Bluff catch twice, turn and river.
You could bluff catch twice, turn and river. That's going to maximize value from their nothings. The question, I guess, is like how many nothings do they have as compared to how many like pairs that just bet the turn and then check behind,
back the river,
right? And maybe they just have more nothings. Like maybe the fact that they like check back the flop is indicative that the nothings in their range, they just have more of those. So maybe check calling is preferred.
And I'm still hopeful that some of those pairs on the right rivers will value jam anyways, right? Like a board pairing river, I assume they just always jam like a 3, 5, 4, 6 deuce. Maybe not the 4-liner ones. I don't know. Those are a little bit closer, but
I think now we're reaching a little. Now we're just being hopeful. We're being hopeful and greedy, I think, at this point, hoping that like 8s jams the river for value. I think this player profile probably not going to jam a small over there.
Just bet half for protection, then check back.
Yeah, check back. Right. Oh. River's a 4-liner, which, I mean, not great if they have like 5, 6, but other than that, wouldn't be ultra concerned. I guess 6s would be the other one, or 4s that would be concerning. Or fill in jams. That those would be the hands that I would expect to see, like 6s, 4s, 5, 6. So the final board here for the podcast listener, flop was 7-5 tray with the tray 5 of spades. Turn was the 7 of spades and the rivers of 4 of hearts. So 3, 4, 5, 7 on the board, through to a flush. John has 500 left. 1,000 in the pot. He checks, villain jams, happy day. John calls, and he beats the Jack 10 of different suits. So I think not jamming the turn was preferable.
Yeah, it worked out.
In hindsight, not jamming the turn worked out pretty well when they have the Jack 10 offsuit in their range. I think it's a good signal that they have more bluffs than pairs.
Yeah, definitely got a lot out of this guy's 3-bet size pre-flop for sure.
Yep, that's why paying attention matters, and playing a high level technically really matters, and has a dramatic impact on your win rate when you're playing in the online poker streets. So yeah, good episode, John. Well done. I think that's going to do it for today's show.
Sweet. See you next week.
See you next week.
Thanks for listening to Chasing Poker Greatness. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on your favorite podcast app. Go to chasingpokergreatness.com to get the newsletter, join the Greatness Village community, book a coaching session, or dive into the latest data-driven poker courses. Follow the show on Twitter at CPG Podcast.